Welcome to another episode of this GUI-based neural network application tutorial. In the last videos we have almost complete the view class. Now we are looking into the back end, the controller class, which contains the business logic. For controller to access information in view class and vice versa, we need to create references in either classes so they can access each other's method. Let's go into main.py. We use it to cross-reference view and controller classes. First we create a controller object. And inside controller we call setView and pass view to it. Then in view object we call setController and pass controller object to it. We will go to these two classes to define these two methods. In top of the file we need to import view and controller classes first. Now we go to the controller.py file we created before. First is to import packages. After that we can define controller class. In initialization method, we create a variable called self.view. This is the reference to the view object. After that we define the setView method. It is quite straightforward. Just pass the argument via to self.view. Let's do the same for view class. Create setController method, and pass con to self.controller. Also to import controller class at the top of the code. In view class, there were a few methods we commented out in the create nodes method. They are related to the controller class. First let's look into setup control network method. This method is used to set up back-end neural network based on the information collected from user through view class. For controller to set up back-end neural network we need to know a few parameters. They are number of input nodes, number of output nodes and number of nodes in hidden layers. The last one will be stored in a list, as we have multiple hidden layers. After we pass these from view class, let's create these variables in controller class. We need these information, because we will use them to create 2D arrays to represent bias and weights. And do calculations to train a neural network. Next missing method in view.createNodes method is flatten list. We use it to flatten the nodes list and to communicate with controller class. What it does. First is to clean the flat node list. Two loops are created to go through the 2D list v node and put them into flat v node list. Another missing method is random numbers. Before we start with it, we need to look into neural network theories to understand how it works and what steps are required. So what is a neural network? It is a software system that mimic human how neural cells work. It can solve problems that were very difficult before, such as visual and voice recognition. It also can show some intelligence such as to play games and chess. It requires training the network use lots data and iterations. Fundamentally it is just a non-linear classifier. The first question is how do we initialize weights and biases in the beginning? The answer is quite simple, we use random numbers. To train it, we first use input data set to feed from left to right. As we are using random weights and biases the result will be poor. After that we can use the good result to compare with calculated result to check the error difference, or we call it cost function. It present how much we departure from the correct result. Based on this figure, then we can go back from right to left to adjust weights and biases. To make the results better in next round. We call this back propagation. And we use an algorithm called gradient descent to adjust weights and bias. We will discuss details in the coding part. The theory is not difficult to understand. Start from random numbers. We use input data to calculate feed-forward result, compared with accurate result to get cost function result, and use backpropagation to adjust weight and biases to optimize the network so it's getting more and more accurate to a degree that we can use it to predict future new data set. Let's start from random numbers. In view class random number method we will call two methods from controller class. They are random weight and random bias. The names are self-explanatory. Let's move to controller.py. First we create random bias method. It takes a list of nodes as argument. We use a loop to travel through the list layer by layer. The vnode list is a 2D list. Inside each layer to get the quantity of nodes. After that we use NumberPy's random function to generate a random bias list called npBias. It takes the numbers of node inside one layer as argument. Finally we put it into list bias, so this will become a 2D list. We turn it into a flattened list and pass it to view.updateBias to update the graphics. We also go up to declare these two lists in class initialization method. To send the new bias values to view, I decided to flatten it first, so it will easier on the receiver side the view class. Therefore we do not need to loop through 2D lists, which can be time consuming. First is to clear the list in case we start from middle of something. And we loop this 2D list and append its elements to a new list called list flat bias. Now we move to view class. First is to create update bias method. It takes the flat bias list as argument. We use a loop to walk through the flat bias list. Recall in create nodes method we have dumped nodes into a flattened vnode list, so we can use it to travel through each node. As both lists, one from controller class, one from view class are created in the same sequences, we can easily assign the bias value we get from controller to each node. The update of node bias text on Canva is done by calling the update bias method in vnode class. Let's go to vnode to create the update bias method. It takes new bias as argument. So first is to assigning the new value to class variable bias. Then we use canvas item config to assign the value to it. First argument is the text ID, after that is the text value or content. I am also interested to show them in different colors. For negative values we show it in green color. Otherwise will be in red color. We use fill command to change color of the text. We have completed randomized bias. Now let's move on to randomly generated weights. Inside controller class, let's create random weights method. It takes a list of nodes as argument. We loop through the 2D list of node. First is to get current layer's quantity of nodes and we also need to see ahead for number of nodes in next layer. Unlike biases, the weights we are going to generate for each layer is a 2D list. When we dump it into a list called NP metric weight, it becomes a 3D list. Then we need to flatten it. Use the flattened list to call view class update weight method. To update the graphics on canvas. Next method is flatten list weight. It take a 3D list the NP matrix weight list and turn it into a 1D list. First is to clear the list and put it in the init method. We loop through this 3D list and append it into a list called flat weight. Now we move into view class, to create the update weight method. It takes a flatten weight list as an argument. We loop through the flat weight list and assigning it to arrows, as they are all in the same sequence, so we can assign the weight to corresponding arrows directly. Let's move into arrow class to create the update weight method. It takes one argument which is the new weight. First is to assign W to self.weight. We use item config to assigning the new content to text. the first argument TID is the ID of the text element, which is stored in arrow class when it was created. Similar to biases, we change the color to red if the value is bigger than 0 and to green color if the value is 0 or below. Now let's test run it through main.py. It is working as intended. In this tutorial we have learned some neural network theory and initialize it using random biases and weights. Also showing them onto tkinter canvas. In next tutorial we will looking into training a neural network and related algorithms. If you like this tutorial please thumb up. Please subscribe for coming up interesting videos.